Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alex Cowell. I'm a non-exec at Southeast Angels, also an exited founder, angel investor, and for my sins, second-time founder. Delighted to be hosting this panel, which, as Christina said, is called Spotting the Winners. Of course, I think as Peter said, we do angel investing because we love to help businesses, but we do also like to spot some winners, don't we? Let's be honest about it. So I'm very excited to hear from our esteemed panelists today. They've invested in some of the most successful companies in the UK. And so our aim over the next 25 minutes or so is to explore how successful investors find and evaluate the most promising startups and share some of their case studies along the way. So let's meet the panelists. Rupa Popat, first of all. Welcome, Rupa. Rupa is an exited entrepreneur and the founder and managing partner of Araya Ventures. She's also an active angel in over 40 startups and VC funds and entrepreneur in residence at Morgan Stanley Inclusive Ventures. Rupa is also the creator of Araya Ventures Academy for Angels, which is on a mission to introduce more women to angel investing, something that's also very close to our heart at Southeast Angels with our Future Angels program. So welcome, Rupa. Next, we have Robert Daguerreau. Robert is co-founder of Passion Capital and has a portfolio of over 100 companies, both as an angel and a VC through his fund. He's invested in some of the UK's most successful startups, including Monzo, Lendable, GoCardless, and Butternut Box. Welcome, Robert. Last but not least, we have Simon Blakey. Simon is on the board of Cambridge Angels and chairs the investment committee at pre-seed and seed fund Playfair Capital. He has been an active angel for over 20 years, investing in more than 100 rounds with in excess of 30 companies currently in his portfolio. And in his own words, he's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of early stage funding. So as we're talking about winners, I'm guessing we might see more of the good, but we shall see. So welcome all, and we're delighted to have you at the summit today, so thanks very much for coming. So I'm going to start off by asking about the highlights of your investment journey to date. So Rupa, I'll come to you first. If you can tell us about your angel journey, VC investment experience, any notable investments, and particularly what you've enjoyed personally.
Great, thank you so much. Really great to be here, so thanks for having me. I think there's been so many things. So as a founder, there were so many things where I said, I wish I had someone to ask that question to, or anyone here who's been a founder, you know that the journey is very non-linear. So you're kind of like this and then like this and so on. And so I think when I started angel investing, there was just so many different things going on in my head. One was, do I get to help other founders with things that I learned? You know, when I went to exit, there were so many things afterwards. I was like, why didn't I spot that? Or why didn't I think about that? Why didn't I think about including that like clause into the docs and things like that? And so I think whenever any of our founders are going through that process, I know that, normally they'll have like an M&A advisor or something, but I'll be like, if you want to have anyone to bounce stuff like with, I'm always here. And I've been at that for one of the companies that in my portfolio, which got acquired by Maven, which is like a unicorn in the US a couple of years ago. In terms of there's quite a lot of questions there, but I guess in terms of like the highlights, I think it's definitely working with the founders. It's also investing in businesses. In my case, they're transforming the way we live and work in some way. So it's like you're also actually having the businesses are good, the people are good, you're actually making an impact in some shape and form. And so I think that's been really good. I've had quite a couple of exits in the portfolio. I just had an offer recently from Google actually for an exit, Google Ventures as well, at a Series A in one of my businesses called Laps in my portfolio. And I think that I didn't take the offer of the exit because I think that the business has a longer way to go and I want to stay in. It was a bit too early to leave the party, but it's been really nice to see those early liquidities as well to kind of get validation that things are going. I've had one failure so far, but I've also had a couple in my earlier angel portfolio where I learned so much. And I just think that often there's no better way to get started than actually getting started, because like the things that now inform my decisions when we talk about the founders and teams and how we do our due diligence, it's actually things that I did early on in my own angel portfolio that now informs how I think about the things now. So that's something that I think is quite close to my heart. Yeah.
Just take that quickly. Just before we go to Robert, because I was going to go there next, but you might be interested to know that a little bird in the foyer told me that Robert might have had a 675x, so I'm wondering if he's going to talk about that as his highlight.
I'll mention it. Actually, very small world because I'm an angel investor in Maven, seed investor, yeah, right from the start.
So mine now.
Oh, great. It's a great company. So my angel investing journey started in about 2008, coming off the back of basically a public company, one of the dot-com relics, I think Giles referenced them earlier, called QXL, which was an 11-year journey. That's not really the subject here, but I'll give you a 30 seconds of highlights. We dual listed London NASDAQ. Market cap went up in the boom to $2.5 billion. We bought all the other online auction companies and online auction business in Europe. Market cap crashed. We went down 99.99%, so our company was worth £937,000. I remember selling the furniture to make payroll once. We rebuilt the business in Eastern Europe, were defrauded. I spent 3 years in court in Poland, rebuilt it again, went up 35,000% over 3 years, and we exited for just under $1 billion in 2008. So after that, I thought, right, I'm either retiring or I'm going to just collapse, one of the two. And then but it was 2008 financial crisis, perfect time to raise a fund, buy low, sell high. It took VCs weren't that common actually in Europe at that point, 2008, so it took over 2 years to raise the fund. And during that period, I made about 30 angel investments. And since then, we've raised 3 funds, just about to close our 4th, 102 investments through those funds, including some of the names you mentioned earlier, Alex. And if you asked about highlights, I guess, I think Go Cardless in many ways was one of our first investments in the first funds, right at the start of that sort of fintech boom in London. And of course, Go Cardless, one of the founders left, started Monzo. We seeded that. That became our biggest and most successful investment as well. Along the way, I did Lendable. You mentioned my 670 times return, which has been a fantastic investment. But also, tons of failure on the way as well. So it's not all been rosy by any means. So
Don't worry, it's just winners today, so that's fine.
yeah. So yeah, that's been my journey.
That's great. Thank you, Robert. And Simon, we've got 2 microphones now, so...
Hello, everyone, and great to be here. Bit of background about me. I started off as a biochemist, then did the classic management accountancy before getting into consultancy, but my side hustle back in the 90s was residential property development in London, which was impossible not to make a lot of money out of. And it was the start of the dot-com boom, and I thought, this angel investing thing sounds interesting, sounds fun. So sold to property and set myself up as an angel investor in 2000. One of the highlights is that angel investing back in 2000 as a 25-year-old gay man with no interest in golf was a challenge. So I had set up a company called Avonmore Development to do a property deal, and then I thought, I'll pretend it's a fund, and then people think I'm an analyst for a fund, and then they'll speak to me, because everyone around then was in their 50s and 60s, doing it very much as a hobby, certainly not doing it full time. One of the highlights for me, though, and actually you learned far more, I think everyone will say, from the failures than you do from the successes. But one of the highlights for me, and one of the things that has allowed me to do angel investing for this length of time, was that I invested into a company that came through a referral through a great couple of angel investors called Nitin Mill and Shah, who started Pepe Jeans. And they said, we've got this company, it's in the prepaid mobile phone top-up space, and we're looking for some money. And it was quite a tortuous round, and one of the incoming investors tried blackmailing the founders, saying they'd pull out if the deal terms wasn't changed. So alongside my brother, I put £150,000 into it. But one of the highlights was that was that we had the first board meeting was what I call the oh shit board meeting, which is when you find out what you haven't learned during due diligence. In this case, the biggest investor was trying to close the company down so he could buy the assets on the cheap and blah, 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 blah. But we managed to turn it around, and the highlight was the fact that we sold it within 18 months, and the founders didn't need to work again. And I thought, oh, angel investing is easy. I was wrong, because after that you have the valley of despair, because your failures will always happen quicker than your successes will. And the number of angels I come across who go, I'm tapped out, I can't do it. There are so many stories, but I think if you want a success, which is still very much ongoing, in 2014, I got a call from a CEO that I invested in, really not a great company, but he said, there's someone 2 floors down from us who wants to speak to you. I spoke to him. He was great. His co-founder was a psycho. I rarely give feedback, particularly about personal issues, but the founder was so good. When he emailed me and said, why have you turned us down? I said, your co-founder is a psycho. 2 years later, he calls me up and goes, you were right. And I said, okay, well, and I've got investors who want to invest in my business, but they don't want him involved. I said, okay, send me your shareholders agreement, send me your articles. He said, don't have any of those. I said, right, okay, let me raise you 300,000 for the business. He said, I'll give you 30% for 120,000. I said, no, I'll give you 300,000 for 20% of the business. That was 2016. The business hasn't raised any further funding, and it did $1 billion GMV last year in the ticketing space. So sometimes it works. That's spoken enough.
That's a great story. Thank you, Simon. So we've heard about some highlights. If I can ask you now, we'll stick with you, Robert, you've got the microphone. How do you go about finding these successes? And when you think you've got one, how do you go about choosing them?
So 80% of our deals come through our network, fundamentally. That's founders, other VCs, employees in those startups, and that is always the best source, because it tends to be unique deal flow, or deal flow that hasn't been shown around. In the end, you need some kind of edge. Important also, though, not to disregard kind of fresh blood, refreshing of that network. And there's a great example out of Brighton, actually. So we've run these things called open coffee mornings over the years. It's like speed dating. You come in, you've got 10 minutes to pitch your business. We're all sitting around on lots of tables, and everyone just keeps rotating. Every 10 minutes, a bell gets rung. And these 2 guys rock up. They're from Brighton. They've got this company called Reward Cloud. And we're thinking, God, who are they? And literally after 10 minutes, we're sort of signing the deal. It's now a company called Tillo. It's a big success story in the area. I don't know if anyone knows it. And so I think keeping that sort of freshness to your network. So the network's super important, but I think you've got to fish outside as well.
That's perfect. Thank you. Rupa?
So just for context, I'm just in the process of also closing like a super angel fund. And so for us, all of our kind of deals come through basically Angel Network, Founder Network, and also the VC Network. On top of that, the academy that you mentioned is really interesting because of the graduates that we've had from last year. They're already showing deal flow as they've started their journey. They're showing deal flow into the fund as well. They're also out there as brand ambassadors for us in the ecosystem. And so actually we had 60 women go through the program last year. We've got 200 this year. And so as that grows, I look forward to seeing that become more of, I guess, like our proprietary Scout network. But ultimately right now, I think like the Founder Network for me has been the biggest one because like not only just founders that I've backed already, introducing me as their value-add investor to other founders, but also just having been a founder since 2012. 35% of my portfolio was in repeat founders in the last portfolio, and all of them do a round before they let VCs in. And I, as a exited founder, I get into those rounds as well. And so things like that, where you get a little edge, you get in earlier, you might see stuff that maybe VCs aren't even getting to at that point. And that's kind of where I like to get in.
That's great. Always good to have an edge on the VCs. Simon?
I would agree that network is important, but 3 of the deals, I'm almost going to regret saying this, but 3 of the deals I've done in the last 2 years have actually been from cold LinkedIn inbound. I take the view that part of my job is to actually look at every single deal that comes into my inbox. There is an automated response for 99% of them, but there is occasionally a deal that comes in that looks really good. One that happened 3 months ago was something that came in. It was very well written. It was a very interesting space. It was a great pitch deck. I arranged a call. I was sitting on that call going, and I know you probably wanted to ask about this, but I was sitting on this call going, you just don't know how good you actually are. And I did the deal, and one of only 2 angels who got into that deal alongside a big German deep tech fund, because I was able to move quickly. So networks are definitely important, and I think being part of things like Southeast Angels Network is really important. But you do have to look at as many deals as you can, because then you do actually get a bit of a feeling as to what good looks like.
Thank you. So I want to talk about founders and how you work out whether a founder is any good or not. I know Peter talked earlier about investing in people with a plan. How do you go about evaluating a founder? Do you have a model, a framework? Is it gut feel? Is it a mixture of the two? What traits do you look for? If you can talk to us about that, Robert.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of sort of interesting tests we apply. So if we decide we like a deal, one of them is, how is this founder going to perform when I put them in front of an A-round investor? They're going to stand up in front of Index or Excel. They're not as nice and cozy and friendly as us. They're going to be much harder. They're going to be changing the management team potentially. How is that founder going to perform? So that's the kind of the A-round test, let's call it. Then there's this idea of, within a VC, there's a small group of partners. One of you often takes either an observer or a board seat. Who's going to take the board seat? So if you decide you like an investment, because you discussed it, you kicked it around, there's nothing wrong with it, it's an interesting sector, who's going to take the board seat? And if no one puts their hand up, that's kind of a problem, right? So we wouldn't do the deal in that case. I think beyond that, you've got to look for specific things. So there's no magic sauce, I don't think. I'll give an example. So Marshmallow, which is actually one of our unicorns, it's a great business, it's an insurtech. 2 founders come in, we're chatting away to them. We had spare desks in our office, so one of the questions we often used to ask was, where do you work out of at the moment? Because we were always keen to have early startups come and sit in our office. And these guys said, well, actually, we work out of Virgin. I'm thinking, what do you mean Virgin? Virgin Gym. Okay. What do you mean you work out of Virgin Gym? Well, yeah, we go to the gym in the morning, we work out, 8 o'clock, and then we just hang out in the cafe and we work there. I said, okay, it doesn't sound super scalable. So, what happens when you employ someone? Well, they get gym membership. I said, oh, that's really nice. You buy them gym membership. No, we make them buy the gym membership. Our office cost is just the 2 of us. That's it.
Well, that's amazing.
So those are the kind of characteristics, right, that you look for in great entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Thank you, Rupa.
Brilliant. Slightly, no gym memberships here. I think, so the sorts of things that, and it's kind of evolved over time because I made a few mistakes in my early portfolio, which I think informs that. But for me, because I do pre-seed and seed, especially at pre-seed, the founders are pretty much the main thing that we're looking at. So I also look at not just individually the founders, but also how, if there are more than one founder, how they work together, what's their background together. Because actually, I've only had one failure in my portfolio. It was going to be my first unicorn, and then venture debt got pulled and all sorts of things happened. But the flip side is I've actually had 3 in my portfolio where there's needed co-founder mediation and coaching, and there's had to be some result at the end of that with either a founder leaving, and those are that's the second biggest thing, I think. So a lot of what I look at, obviously, in individual founders is all the kind of usual things we'll be looking at, but I'm also looking at how have they worked together, where have they worked together before, what have they been doing, and why are they complementary in the way that they are. Even things like how they talk to each other, or when they're presenting together, or if you're in a call with both of them or meeting them in person, or 2, 3, etc., depending on how many founders there are. There's a lot to tell just from those sorts of interactions. The other thing is like with the individual founders, for me, the why really matters. Like, what is it? You know, I had, when I went out to be an entrepreneur and I left investment banking to do that, I had very, very specific whys as to why I wanted to do this business and this thing now. And so for me, I think, you know, when we talk again about this non-linear journey for founders, it's the why that really gets through those tough times and the bit that, you know, the founders stick around even in those moments to make things work. And so for me, it's really important to understand how they got to this point and what the journey up to this point. And, you know, that could be all the way from childhood, depending on where the why began. Just an example, just to put context, is I invested in The Lowdown, which is slowly becoming like Europe's largest women's health review platform. You know, the founder, Alice, she went through 10 years of challenges with hormones on the back of using a contraception that she was given pretty much for skincare management. And she had all sorts of challenges herself. And then when she realized that it was actually something that she was going through this situation because of something that had been prescribed to her, she was like, I don't want anyone to ever go through this again. And so her why is so strong. So she started just as a contraception health review site. It now covers a whole bunch of different things. But you know that the why there is just so important to like every decision she makes because she herself is the customer in that situation.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's a great story. Simon?
It's a really interesting topic, and you know, at Playfair, when we've actually just bringing in 2 new analysts, and the first questions that they ask is, what's the early indications of success? And I've got a huge long list of things. First of all, I do have a slight allergy to pitch decks and people presenting to pitch decks. I want to have a conversation with you. You'll find actually that the really good entrepreneurs will be able to highlight the points that they're making in a variety of different ways. They'll be able to show mental acuity. You know, the people who have just learnt their pitch deck, they will come up with the same answer to the same question again and again and again. And they may not have domain expertise. And that's the other thing that I'm probably really looking for as well, is they've got the why, the stubbornness. Why is this the problem that you are going to solve? Why are you the right person? And do you have that stick and that grit? And it might well be from a personal story, a personal experience. In the Playfair portfolio, we've got a lady, Liz, CEO of Material Evolution. She is obsessed by concrete. She did her PhD in concrete in her parents' garage. She wants to make recyclable concrete, and she's raised a 35 million A round to build a factory to do just that. So it's that slight obsession. And also, how do they deal with being challenged? Because one of the other things that we are also talking about is coachability. So I will be a little bit, may I say, a bit of a dickhead in one of the calls, just to see how they deal with being challenged. Because if you're sitting around a board table, you are going to have situations where you don't agree. Now, do you get to resolution by having a well-constructed discussion, or do you have people pulling their hair out? Now, the pulling the hair out, the WeWorks of CEOs and all the rest of it get more of the headlines, but it's quite stressful dealing with that, and particularly as an angel investor doing, you know, a 10-year plus journey with them. So those are just a few little things I would think about.
That's brilliant, thank you. And my last question then is just about your attitude to risk. So obviously, we all know, if you want the big returns, you need to take some fairly big risks. And you've all got fairly significant portfolios. Do you think over time, we'll stay with you, Simon, for this one. We've got about 45 seconds each on this one. Do you think over time you've become more conservative, more of a risk taker, or, you know, it's not really changed?
The first, I'll end by just saying this, if I've got 45 seconds. The first deal that goes south, it's like breaking up for the first time. Your heart's broken. What have I done wrong? How could I have done better? What signs did I miss? But you have to realize it's not just about you. You realize that failure is part of the game that we are all playing in. Once you get to the 5th, 6th, seventh failure, which we will all generally do. I think we have to sit there and we have to be supportive of the founders, because this, in an otherwise high-flying career, this might be the first failure that they're going through, and they need support. I've seen VCs be horrendous during a downward spiral. You just you have to be objective. You have to be slightly dispassionate. You have to realize that it's part of the job. And a few years ago, decided I wasn't making enough failures, so I decided I wasn't taking enough risk. You do the same as everyone else. You're going to get the same results as everyone else.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, so I think when assessing honestly, I'm completely schizophrenic on this. So on one hand, particularly coming from an operating background, I guess like many people in this room, you see these businesses, you get excited by them, you fall in love with the idea, you start projecting yourself into the CEO's role. Terrible thing to do, by the way. Never do that, because you start thinking, if I was running this business, and then of course you completely miss the point. So you can sort of fall in love with the business. On the other hand, excuse me, I've had so many failures. You're just looking for all the red flags, right? I mean, my God, this founder's a lunatic. He's, control freak, completely delusional. So all these things you're looking for, which make you want to back off from taking any risk at all. So at some point, you've just got to find a balance. Like, there's no magic source to that. It's balancing those two kind of countervailing issues.
Brilliant, thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, so the way I think about it is that we are in the most riskiest asset class. So we are at that top end where it's highest potential return, but highest potential risk. So we're already like playing there. And so the way I think about it is very much like, what can I do to diversify and minimize? So one of the things, like in the new fund, we're doing 50 to 60 companies over the next 4 years in pre-seed. And so that's already getting enough diversification that I feel confident that we've got enough exposure there. The other things I think about is, when I say I have this like 25, 30, 35% like a repeat founder bucket, for me, they're 2 to 3 times more likely to get to a Series B because of the fact that they've, done the 0 to 100 playbook. So for me, that's a de-risk mechanism. I also think female founders are a phenomenal de-risk mechanism. And 50% of my portfolio, or just over actually, is either female or mixed gender. And so I think actually just having, but not just gender, I think just having diversity across the board, whether it's their experience, whether it's socioeconomic, gender, all of these sorts of things, I think actually makes a more balanced portfolio as well. And so that's how, when I think about it, I think, yep, we're playing here already. So let's think about then how do we minimize that, but while still going for the top end of returns. And that's kind of how I approach it.
That's great. So it's all about de-risking. That's brilliant. Thanks.